friends, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I know how as quilters and crafters alike, how we like to start our Christmas project ahead of time. So I thought I share with you guys what I'm doing for Christmas. You know, like what kind of quilty gift and what kind of Christmas project I want to work on this year or start to work on this year. For 2024, I am going to be sewing from this Perfect 10 quilt in here that are fast, easy, and doesn't require a lot of energy. Back in March, I made a quilt from this book. This was the quilt pattern that I used, and I used a Melissa Mortensen, like a fun, girly kind of fabric. I'm going to show you what that quilt look like. It's quilted and bounded. So I want to show you what it looks like in real life using your own fabric, because in this book, none of the quilt that were made were actually fabric as far as actual quilt mock-up. For example, let me show you. For each quilt, you got the actual block in like a Bella Solid kind of fabric, but the actual quilt was in mock-up of colors. So sometimes if you are not a color savvy quilter, it's hard to picture making the quilt using your own color, because you're kind of like, well, what matches and what doesn't. So now I'm going to show you what my quilts look like with this pattern right here. So I'm going to swing you around on the other side of this studio so you can see what it actually looks like. Here is what my quilt ended up looking like. So I'm just going to kind of lift this up so you can kind of see what it ended up looking like right here. The binding, I used the stripe from the line called Margot, and then the fabric manufacturer is Figo. So this is what it looks like, and I did use machine binding. This is what it looks like on the back. And then on the front, I stitch as close to the edges, so you can't really see my stitching on here. And this is the backing. I had enough of the same line of fabric for the backings. It just kind of went together rather nicely. So I'm not sure if you guys can see the quilting on here. Maybe you can see it better on the back. So this is it right here. I like things to be symmetrical and kind of in order, so that's kind of why I did it this way. So for 2024, I'm going to be using this layer cake right here. Okay, it's by Riley Blake, and it's also designed by Melissa Mortensen. She designed like a fun, very fresh. Her colors are always fresh. Her Halloween color is amazing every year when she comes out with one. So this is the color gradient on the back. You can still find this on Etsy. I've had this in my stash for quite a while. She also designed a panel. This panel right here, I've used some of it and cut out some pieces to use. I'm going to try to incorporate these Mr. and Mrs. Claus and this little candy cane in with the design. So I have a few background that I want to use. This right here, I don't have enough because these are like older fabric that I have in my stash for a while, and I'm not going out buying new stuff. So I want to use what I have. I have this right here, and then I have this right here. It's Twinkle by April Rosenthal. See that? The Christmassy gold that you see is metallic. This is still being sold. Fat Quarter Shop has these exact line. Let me show you what it looks like so you can see the skew on here. This is what I'm using right here. Okay, and it's by Moda. For this quilt, I am going to use the banana pattern quilt. Let me show you. The banana quilt looks like this. It's a lot easier than this one right here. If you have this book, I know a lot of people have this book. Please do. So along with me. So with that being said, what I'm going to do now is starch it. And yes, you can starch the layer cake and you will still have enough left. So if you have this book, this is a great opportunity to use up your layer cake that's in your sewing room that's been sitting for a while. So use it up. This will be a good opportunity to make a quilt for someone you like or love, or both, because this is a labor of love. So with that being said, what I'm going to do now is starch this, cut it, and then we are going to make the entire quilt. All right, I will see you on the other side of the sewing machine. So what I'm going to do now is take my piece C and my piece B and just do sew and flip. If you're making this quilt and you have directional fabric and you're worried about will they be standing upright, this is a squared quilt. Either way it stands, I think it will be okay. And then by the time you wash it and using it, if you're using little pieces like this, It's not going to matter if it's standing straight up or sideways. I'm not really too particular about that. If you are, you can flip it. You can put your square on your fabric, test it first, and flip it to see if it's going the right direction. In this case, I got lucky the first time, and it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew. I have this 1/4 inch tape right here so I don't have to draw a line on my fabric. Then I'm gonna come around the corner here. Since these are meant to stand up this way, I'm going to put this square on like this and see if it's also upright. Yes, it is. So I'm gonna sew. Transparency, guys, I used up the entire pieces on this fabric. I didn't have enough, so what I did was just piece 2 of them together to make a whole piece. Sometimes it is what it is, guys. It is what it is, okay? It's not gonna be bulky. I did press it open, so it doesn't even have bulk at all. It's just as flat as a board. And then I'm gonna come around here and I'm gonna sew the other side. Now that these are done, I'm just gonna cut off my extra pieces right here. As long as you have at least a 1/4 inch, and that's all that matters, I guess. And I'm not gonna save this part right here to make like a little teeny tiny HST, because you cannot save every single cutaway. If you do that, and that's what you do, and that's your forte, that's completely okay. You have to be prepared to have your sewing room or sewing space to be taken over by scrap, because if you don't get your scrap under control, they literally will have family and they will have to hire their own cleaning services because they will take over your sewing room. I don't save everything. I do keep them under control because I can't stand having a lot of stuff, and people that know me in real life knows that I don't like clutter. I'm more of a minimalist, so that's kind of how I've been, and yeah, that's that. These right here are completed. I'm just going to now use a little bit of iron to flatten it some. Then we're going to make our full block. So I have this 2 sets right here to go with this, and I have this 2 sets right here to go with this right here. So these 2 are set. So what we're gonna do right now is assemble our blocks. So I'm gonna put this face right here, and I'm gonna put this like this, and I'm gonna put this like this. Okay, the reason why I'm using the fabric that came from the panel is just to show you that sometimes you get a panel and then you don't know what to do with it. This is just an idea, and I just kind of fuzzy cut it down to the size that I need. Now the reason why this is this way is because I rotated my ruler this way to get all the parts that I need and still have a 1/4 inch out here. That's why I was particular about sewing this on camera, so you guys can see different ways of how to utilize your panels. This seam is going this way and this seam is going this way. So what I'm going to do now is put them together. My thread is still holding together, so I have more control of the seam. So here we are. This block is completed. Who would think to put a Santa with a pink background? I think that's just classic. Super classic, super cute. All right, so we're just gonna sew. This is our block number 1 and our block number 2. What I'm gonna do now is press this with an iron. The next thing I'm gonna do now is continue sewing the entire block for this quilt, and then we will meet again, okay? I have this segment sewn. This is 1 block, 2 block, 3 block, and 4. So what I did was I connected these 2 blocks to a sashing, and the same thing over here to its sashing. Then I sewed it onto the horizontal sashing, and that will make 1 segment, okay? That will make 1 segment for your block. So this is first segment. You will need to make 9 segments just like this of the different colors from your layer cake. So now what I'm going to do is connect a sashing right here and then sew on the next segment of blocks to it. So that's what I'm going to do now. And then I will sew the entire block, and then we will see what it looks like. If it comes out okay, that's great. And if not, this will give you an example of how you can use different kind of fabric to make this quilt. Now I'm using Christmas fabric. That doesn't mean you cannot use anything else. That's because the holiday is coming up and I want to have this project done before Christmas. So I want to have it quilted done before Christmas. So that's why I'm getting an early start for my Christmas project for this year. So now with that being said, let's go on ahead and join our next segment together. So here is the next segment. I have 3 segments for each line. So I'm just going to join this and this. I'm going to sew them together to make this row of blocks. Technically, you are supposed to sew on the part that has the most seam. I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do that. How I know that my seam allowance are good is when all this kind of line up. There's no overage on either side and there's no overage on this side right here. So it all match up. So that's how you know that your seam allowances matches, because there's no overage right there. See, it matches up. And if I look here, it also matches up. So that's how you know when you maintain a 1/4 inch seam allowance, it always works out. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and sew this and then we will finish up the quilt and I will show you what it looks like. Okay. All right, I'm gonna open it up right here so y'all can see. So I have the entire quilt laid out here. This segment and this segment, they have to match. So what I'm gonna do is flap it over and make sure that these 2 seam kind of match up. So I'm just gonna flip this over and then put it, you know, line them up and pin it and then go from there. And so I am matching these up here and they do match. So what I'm gonna do is just going ahead and pin it. And I'm going to go to the other section where I have the large sashing. I'm going to lay it together and I'm going to pin and I'm going to pin. I'm going to go ahead and sew this together and then we'll have our inner quilt completed. Okay, now let's test and see if everything looks good. So this is kind of where we are, just like that. Okay, so this is our quilt right now. This is what it's looking like. The next thing I'm doing is just sewing on the inner border and then I'll sew that outer border and then we will be done with the entire quilt. Now this outer border here is not part of the pattern. I'm just choosing to add an outer border on and then I'll put the inner border, which looks something like this. Okay, it's something like this and it's going to bring everything together to make it cohesive. I want it to be as light as possible, you know, like very light colors, and so that's what I'm going for with this quilt. So what I'm going to do now is sew on the final outer border, which is this fabric right here. There we go. Let's sew on the borders and then we are going to be done with the quilt. So I've sewn on both of my side border and my bottom border. I have not sewn on the top border as of yet. Since I am incorporating this into this quilt, this was part of the panel. I wanted to make sure that I use every bit of the panel and have nothing left by the time I'm done with this quilt. So what I did was I cut this part the same size as the border. I marked halfway on here and I marked halfway on here. Then I took my border piece, I cut it in half, right? I cut it right here in half and I sewed it onto the corner right here, okay? So I know I have half over here and half over here. And that will be long enough for the entire width of the quilt. So what I did was I marked the halfway marked right here. I'm not sure if you can see it. I did mark it with a real pen because I want y'all to see it. Right? Because it's gonna be in the seam, it wouldn't even matter anyway. So this is my halfway. I marked it right here. It's gonna also be inside the seam. That's what I mean. I'm gonna join them right here together and I'm going to pin it. Now this is when it matters. This is when pinning matters. I'm going to pin here first, right in the middle where my middle part is. I wanna make sure I pin it twice. So that way when I sew to that point, I will know. And then I'm gonna come. Now this is just something that I'm incorporating into this. This is not part of the quilt. I just wanted to show you so that way in case you have piano fabric and you wanna work it into your quilt, I have done that throughout this quilt to kind of show you what it'll look like. So then I'm gonna come to this side and I'm going to pin just like I did with the other side. I'm gonna come to the very end of the fabric right here and I'm going to pin. I'm gonna go ahead and sew, just so. So this is my quilt all completed and on the wall. So I want to talk a little bit about the actual quilt. This border right here was not meant to be there and it was supposed to be completed, and we'll put that. This outer border is supposed to be just on right here. But I decided to put an inner border and then add the outer border here because I wanted to incorporate everything that I bought when I purchased the layer cake. I purchased the panel, and the panel has this right here that says welcome to the North Pole, and I wanted to incorporate it into the quilt because if I didn't, I won't have any more use for it. And I also wanted to cut out Santa Claus and also cut out Mrs. Claus. They were bigger, so I just sized them down to the size that matches the squares. This inner border was not part of the pattern. The color was not enough, so I had to use this white on white right here, and I had to use it somewhere else right here because I didn't have enough color variation within the layer cake. I didn't want to use a different collection because the reds and the greens and all the colors didn't match. It will kind of stand out if I do that. So that's why I went on ahead and just used this and just kind of incorporated it in. So for my backing, I'm thinking about using this right here. This right here is the Christmas collection from Fancy That Design. She's a motor designer, so that's what I'm going to be using for the back. Now for binding, I have this right here and then this right here. This is by Fig Tree. This is her Christmas collection from a few years back. And then this right here is Bonnie and Camille. This is Sunday Stroll. I'm not sure yet what I want to use. So I have these. I'm not sure yet what I want to use for the binding, but I am sure that I want to use this for the backing. And I just wanted to show you what it will look like if you actually sew it using your own fabric, and just kind of give you an idea on how to visualize the quilt. This designer is Melissa Mortensen, and then the designer for this layer cake is also Melissa Mortensen. I mean, you can kind of see how happy and cherry her colors are, even if it's not a holiday color. So that is that for that quilt. So I'm getting a head start on my holiday sewing and quilting. And I just wanted to share this video just to give you a little bit of encouragement to get started because the holiday is around the corner. It is August of 2024. We have a few months left for us to be in a holiday season, and it gets busy. So by the time the holiday come, this will already be quilted, done, binded, and ready to be used. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you are having a great day. Don't forget to subscribe down below, and I would love to see you in my next video. You have a great day.